In this video, I'll be going through my artist study of the Illustrator LAM, going through what I think is the 4 most important points that I've learned from the study, and showing you how I've put them into practice by creating my own LAM-inspired illustrations. For this breakdown, I went through LAM's time-lapse videos, interviews, and many of his illustrations, and I've broken down his style into 4 main points, starting with LAM's painting techniques, color theory, effects and decorations, and lastly, eyes. By following these steps, you'll be able to give your illustration a distinctive, vibrant graphic look, just like LAM's artwork. Although we can tell that LAM has a distinctive style to his illustration, however, if we look closer at his work, we can see that the techniques that he used were all over the place. So here I tried my best to find patterns in LAM's painting style. I tried to find what makes LAM, well, LAM. So here's what I came up with. One of the techniques that make LAM's artwork stand out is the use of halftone. These are often used in bright areas such as highlights and darker areas, mainly shadows. He did this by importing a halftone pattern and masking it to specific areas of the illustration. This technique alone will give your illustration a graphic comic look. Another detail that makes LAM's artwork unique compared to most anime illustrations is the bold use of saturated colors in the hair. LAM uses an assortment of colors from bright neon yellow to green, blue, all the way to rainbow to make the illustration even more striking. These colors could be from bounce light, skylight, hair highlight. I mean, to be honest, I have no clue why there are so many colors in the hair, but this mix of colors is exactly what makes LAM's illustration very mesmerizing to look at. Sometimes LAM would play around with the shapes of the highlights, turning hair reflection into shapes such as diamonds, giving the image an even stronger graphic impression. I think how you paint is actually not that important in order to draw like LAM. Like for example, this video, LAM pretty much used a solid hard brush for the entire illustration. In his more recent works, he often uses an opacity brush to create a softer look on the skin and clothes. I think 90% of what makes an illustration LAM's comes from his godlike use of colors and graphic elements that we'll be going through in a bit. So I don't think you have to worry too much about how you choose to draw. What's more important is what colors you use for your illustration and how you use them. So this is just my guess on how LAM might pick and choose his colors. LAM came from a graphic design and advertising background, so the colors that he picked are usually aimed at grabbing the attention of the audience quickly, especially for fast-paced social media such as Twitter. I found that there are mainly 6 different colors that were used often in his illustrations. These are crimson red, neon green, cyan, hot pink, orange, and yellow. So if you don't know what colors to use for your artwork, these could be great starting points. I've found that his color often follows a triadic color scheme, which is how the colors that you choose form a triangle on the color wheel. Let's say that you want to use hot pink as the main color of your illustration. So if we follow the triadic color scheme, then the supporting colors will be this yellowy green and blue. This is not a rule that he follows every time. Rather, it's more like a guide that you can use if you have trouble picking colors like me. However, the way red was used is actually a little different from other colors. On many occasions, red was often used with black, resulting in a somewhat monochromatic illustration. These red and black illustrations seem to be in a category of their own. Sometimes, it's more beneficial if you desaturate the supporting colors, keeping only the main colors super saturated, and I mean really saturated. LAM is not afraid of using bright and bold colors to grab the attention of the people scrolling through social media. Also, keep in mind the ratio of the 3 colors in the illustration. As a starting point, I personally try to keep the colors at something like 60%, 30%, and 10%. Effects and decorations can be used as a shortcut to make your illustration more LAM-like. These are face paint, patterns and symbols, and pins and badges. Many of LAM's characters have face paint or stickers right around the eyes. These are usually graphic symbols that link to the story of the character in one way or another. It can be cute, edgy, scary, playful, but just keep in mind that it should relate to the character somehow. Patterns and symbols are usually seen in backgrounds or clothing, and sometimes as tattoos. When used, it gives the whole image a more graphic look. The clean geometric symbol contrasts and complements the hand-drawn illustration really well. Pins and badges are another decorative element that helps add complexity to the illustration and give it a graphic look. These often work really well with hair and on clothes. In conclusion, every object that were placed in the illustration has some kind of purpose. They are often linked to the story of the image somehow. You could say that the main aim of his illustration is to tell a story. Whether it's trying to tell the audience, for example, the location, the mood, the emotion, or character type. Consider the narrative behind your character and what you are trying to tell the audience, then add objects revolving around that. The way LAM draws eyes changes from illustration to illustration. So here, I'll point out the basic structure of how LAM usually draw the eyes. LAM's most common eye structure goes a little something like this. Sharp upper eyelashes, small triangular lower eyelashes. Usually there are bright neon rings, gradient from top to bottom, and then a black dot in the middle. Other time, it's insane crazy eyes. LAM is often very playful and experimental with the iris and the pupil. From normal looking iris to squares, stars, and melting irises. And the pupil varies from normal circles to snowflakes, lightning, stars, heart, and even a logo. Basically, you can go pretty wild for the eyes, replacing the shape of the iris and pupil into something that help convey the emotion of your character. I mean, as long as it's cool looking, it's fine. Those were my take on the main elements that LAM often uses in his illustrations. Now is the part where I put everything that we just went through into practice by making my own LAM-inspired illustration. When I first saw LAM's artwork, the ones that caught my attention the most were this series of illustrations where the characters are sideways, looking straight ahead. I wanted to try and create an illustration that can kinda just fit in with the lineup, so I decided to base my illustration on this sideways concept. It's worth mentioning that these were his earlier works, so the coloring style is still flat and simple, which I thought was a good starting point for my first attempt. I started by drawing the thumbnail. These were based on a 3D model, and picking my favorite composition. I then refined the thumbnail and added some rough colors. The main color followed a triad color scheme, where blue is the main color, and the two supporting colors are yellow and red. I decided to choose yellow for the background, and red was used very minimally, only appearing around the eyes and mouth. You might be wondering, how do you end up with these colors? Was it a straightforward process where you just pick the colors from the triangle? Well, yes and no. Because I did pick colors that are triads, but I made many variations and tests, then tweaked the hues and saturation to the point where I'm happy with the colors. In a Wacom interview, LAM mentioned that the rough process was pretty much 90% of the work. You can see this in LAM's time-lapse video. The colors and compositions were pretty much done by the rough stage. So for my attempt, I decided to dedicate most of my time into the rough process, only continuing once I'm happy with the pose, composition, and colors. From here, LAM would paint on top over and over until the image is finished. But for me, I decided to redraw the lines and colors instead of drawing on top. I did this because I had a lot to fix, so I thought redrawing would be a better option in this case. I then filled the newly drawn line art with the same colors from the rough. Here I also added the face stickers. I used Adobe Illustrator to create these stickers, but what program you use doesn't really matter too much. But generally, these stickers should be quite clean and geometric. I made these using simple geometric shapes and using the Shape Builder tool. At this stage, I compared my progress to LAM's work and realized that I've been way too scared of using saturation, so I made every color more saturated. Here's where I added diamond-shaped hair highlights. I picked yellow for the hair highlight, since I think it could be the color of the light that bounces off the yellow background. But really, I think yellow is more interesting than white in this case. I added halftone using a halftone brush, then clipped the layer to the hair shadows. This graphic element was then reused as the pattern for the background. The pattern was in an angle, since I thought it could help imply motion. And this was the outcome of my first attempt in trying to draw like LAM. Overall, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I used a triad color scheme, had face stickers, and used halftones. And most importantly, I think this fits right into the lineup. However, I wanted to add more elements such as pins and badges, and also I haven't drawn the eyes yet because I thought that these happy, closed eyes fit with this illustration better. So here's my second attempt. I'll be going through this one quickly, showing you where I applied each concept from the breakdown. I started with the thumbnail to see the overall composition, then refining them and filling it with triad colors of pink, green, and orangey yellow. I then blocked in the shadows and added halftone to those shadows. This time, I filled the image with graphic elements such as hairpins, badges, and keychain for the sword. Again, I reused the graphic for the background. I also added a lot of stickers to the areas around the eyes. This time, the hair highlight was white since this hot pink was way too strong and pulled too much attention to the hair. I used orange for the shadows of the hair and added hints of green to make the image more playful. The eyes were also very simple. The main elements are the lower triangular eyelashes and white stars at the center of the pupil to show excitement. And that's it. Very straightforward. Each element was added to make the image look very playful. And elements like the stars in the eyes and the sword pose implies that she's ready to pull them apart and start slicing up some enemies. Hopefully this video was helpful. What artist do you want to see a breakdown of next? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. And that's the end. Thanks for watching.